Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzo.
Today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man 3. Released in 2007, directed by Sam Raimi. Written by Sam Raimi, Ivan Raimi, and Alvin Sargent, from a story by Sam Raimi and Ivan Raimi. Starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Thomas Hayden Church, Topher Grace, Bryce Dallas Howard, and the always good J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. And we're talking about this film mainly because we weren't sure what superhero film we were going to talk about this week. And a listener by the name of Connor Lynch, who comments pretty often on our Facebook, and we appreciate that, he recommended it, so really we have him to blame for making us watch this film.
Thank you, Connor.
But that also being said, another listener named Christopher Higgins recommended Doctor Strange, which I finally got to see today. But unfortunately, John has not gotten a chance to see it. I haven't seen it,
and I don't know if Christopher knows. I mentioned it early on when we started this podcast, started doing the podcast as a whole, that I've got 4 kids, and they're growing, but they're still relatively young. Like, my oldest is 9. And I've got a 4-year-old as my youngest, and not the most financially oozing person in the world, so I don't get to go to the movies too often. I have very select ones like Star Wars and, right, Avengers and Batman. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to see or put Doctor Strange on that list. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. But I've heard good things about it, and I had it on my top 10 list. Definitely as one of my top anticipated movies for this year. So I definitely want to see it. I think Benedict Cumberbatch is a ridiculously astounding great choice for Stephen Strange, and I think it's actually could be. Now that I'm thinking about it, the best comic book movie casting without seeing a performance, just based on looks. Yeah, that we've gotten.
Yeah. Well, spoiler alert! I saw it today and I really liked it. So I'm hoping we can talk about it, but we might have to wait for it to come out on DVD or something.
But they come out pretty quick nowadays. You used to have to wait.
It used to be. Yeah, it used to be. I remember when Jurassic Park came out. Jurassic Park came out in June of '93, but it did not come out on VHS until October of '94.
Wow.
So back then movies took a really long time to come out on DVD. Now there's I guess I don't know if. Physical media is dying, so I don't know if they still make a decent amount of money from DVD sales or what, but I learned that movies only have to stay in the theater for... Oh, no, that's not true. Movies have to wait 90 days before they can be released on DVD.
Mm-hmm.
And so most movies come out 90 days they come out on DVD 90 days after they've been released in theaters. So Doctor Strange
seems like they leave the theater a lot quicker too now.
Well, they do, absolutely. Movies, I don't know if it was because there were less huge movies being made back then, even 20 years ago, or what. But yeah, movies, if you don't see a movie in the first 2 or 3 weeks it's out, you might not get a chance to see it in the theater.
Yeah.
And that used to not be the case.
No, I was going to say, you mentioned how long it took for Jurassic Park, and that the summer in 94, a whole year after it had been released, I remember passing the theater and seeing Jurassic Park was still in the theater. I was like, that's insane.
Yeah, absolutely insane. That would never happen today.
No.
So you can pretty much guarantee if you... Doctor Strange was just released on November 4th. So it'll be on DVD in February. For sure.
Okay.
Very rarely do they get pushed a little later than that, but I'm almost positive that Doctor Strange will be released in February. March at the latest would be my guess.
So with this being a request, our next movie, we kind of decided to do, so we don't run out of superhero movies as quick as we would have been. We are doing a superhero movie, and then a non-superhero movie, and then a superhero movie. It's kind of the way we've started doing this. So our next movie will be a non-superhero movie. And if you have any requests or anything of it's kind of got to be like a cult classic, or have somewhat of a following, or of culture.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to, but yeah, I think people are more interested in those films, or at least more interested in maybe listening to us talk about those films. Like, we did an episode a long time ago on, like, Minority Report.
Yeah.
And I don't think that one did very well in terms of downloads. But there has been a couple that have been thrown out. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. I can't remember what some of the other ones were that were thrown out there. But anything like that, if you're interested in hearing something on those, we'd love to know.
I'm thinking that around Christmas time, we're going to do Fellowship.
Lord of the Rings, okay.
Because those movies came out each Christmas, for 3 years. So, you'd go see it in the theater, and it was a little bit
winter. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the movies aren't Christmassy, but the experience of watching them has a little bit of that Christmas to it.
I hear you. Cool. Well, back to Spider-Man 3. This was the final chapter of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. Although it wasn't originally going to be the final chapter, they were going to make a Spider-Man 4. And then I think they were even in like pre-production with that film before it got scrapped, and they ended up making The Amazing Spider-Man instead. So this was the final.
Yeah, Raimi. before they announced The Amazing Spider-Man, I remember it was literally like a week before they said we're rebooting the franchise. I heard Tobey Maguire, he was on some talk show, I think. Either that or he was being interviewed on a floor, but he said that they were getting started on Spider-Man 4.
Yeah, I think they were pretty close to shooting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember if John Malkovich had been officially cast, but I remember there was talk about John Malkovich playing Vulture.
Yeah, which would have been probably awesome.
Yeah, probably would have been. And I don't know if Dylan Baker was going to get to play Lizard in that film or not. But obviously, I mean, he was Dr. Kirk Connors in Spider-Man 2 and in Spider-Man 3. It just seems like it was inevitable that he was going to become Lizard eventually.
I have a feeling that he would have been in it since they went the two-villain route with this one.
Yeah. And then Lizard ended up being an Amazing Spider-Man.
Right.
Which is always kind of interesting to me because, and we can talk more about this one on the Batman Begins episode whenever we do that, but Scarecrow and, I can't remember if it was supposed to be Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul, in Batman 5, which was going to be after Batman and Robin. But I know Scarecrow was going to be the villain in the next Batman film, but then when Batman and Robin did really terrible, that movie got scrapped. But I remember there was talk of Howard Stern playing Scarecrow.
Wow.
Which would have been terrible. But then Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul ended up being in Batman Begins.
Right.
So it's interesting how they keep the villain idea for the reboots.
I'm sure whenever they go and reboot a franchise, they're not they don't just go in blind. They're like, hey, what were some of the ideas, even though we're let's at least see what you're doing. And then they will probably also have with the Batman movies on their hands, they're like, well, we've done the Joker, Penguin, Catwoman.
Right, Riddler, something fresh.
Yeah.
Right.
I know I mentioned this earlier, but it was crazy, and I felt so, it just made me feel so, proud. I was able to guess the Batman villains.
Yeah.
Before they were, announced. So I predicted the Penguin.
Yep.
Riddler. That was before, well, I guess Catwoman was the second one. or was the first time that they did 2 villains. So
right.
I would only predict 1. Predict the Riddler, didn't do Two-Face, and then he probably would have been my next one had he not been in Batman Forever. But since he was in that one, I went with Mr. Freeze. They ended up picking him. And then I was like, next one's going to be Scarecrow. And then there was like a 7-year gap.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, I started losing after... Well, of course they showed the Joker card in Batman Begins, so that one was pretty easy.
That was an easy one. Right.
And I don't think I would... I didn't guess Bane because Bane was already in...
Batman and
Robin, so I didn't think they'd really be... If they did revisit a character, Bane was not the highest on my list of someone that they would have picked.
I think a lot of folks thought that Nolan was going to go with Riddler.
Mm-hmm. I was hoping so, because I wanted there to actually be a character that we knew.
Become Riddler?
That turned out to be Riddler, and all 3 movies... Kind of like The Prestige or something, where all 3 movies was a setup. That would have had him outdo the Joker, though.
Yeah, that's true.
But it would have been really cool if there had been a character that you just didn't suspect. And he's like, by the way, I am a genius guy that likes to mess with people's minds and do puzzles. And this whole thing's been a puzzle, and I like to be called the Riddler. Something along those lines.
That would have been cool.
A little less cheesy.
I know there was... some talk too about Penguin being in it, and a lot of people wanted like Philip Seymour Hoffman to be the Penguin. And I remember hearing a quote or reading a quote from Christopher Nolan, and he said, "I'm more interested in working with Philip Seymour Hoffman than I am with having the Penguin in the film."
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, if you did the Penguin, especially in that universe, he just would have been like a mob boss.
Right.
With that as his nickname.
Yeah. Which is kind of how he is on that Gotham TV show right now. He's not really... Well, I haven't been watching... I'm still on season 1, so I don't know what's going on in season 2 and 3, but in season 1, he's not a mob boss. He's trying to work his way up, though. But everybody calls him Penguin because he looks like it.
Yeah.
But anyway, Spider-Man 3. We were talking about, Batman Returns having 2 villains, and then, of course, Batman Forever had 2 villains, and so on and so on. Spider-Man 1 and 2 only had 1 villain apiece, really. And so then Spider-Man 3 decided to make up for all that and have, 3 villains in this film.
Yeah.
Too many, really. That's really the problem with this film. Well, there's multiple problems with this film, but one of the problems is just too many villains. And I think part of the reason for that is, it's fairly well known that Sam Raimi didn't want Venom in the film.
Right.
He, he grew up on Spider-Man comics, and Venom is a fairly new villain created in the 90s, and so he just wasn't a Venom fan, and he didn't want him in the movie, but the studio kind of pushed for it, and so he got kind of shoehorned in. And I think it hurt both Sandman and Venom by having them both in the film.
Yeah.
Sam Raimi obviously wanted Sandman. He was just, and he liked Sandman, and it was obviously going to tie up Harry's story too, but ended up putting Venom in there as well, and it just was too many things going on.
Venom showed up in the 80s.
Oh, well, whatever. Still new.
And he was created by Todd McFarlane.
I think I knew that.
Which is, it's very noticeable when you compare him and Spawn together.
Right. Yeah, that's very true.
Speaking of Venom, the Venom in this movie the appearance was a big letdown for me. I remember this was one of the most anticipated movies for me of my life.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially after how good Spider-Man 2 was.
Exactly. And seeing... I remember there was some teaser footage that came out before the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And you got that little scene in the church with the bell, and you got to see the symbiote fall down on Eddie.
Yep.
And then it did a quick thing, that quick shot of where he like raises his face, and you get that quick shot of what he looks like.
Comes towards the camera,
and it looked like okay, but there was something a little nervous about it for me. Like you could see that the eyes were right and everything, but he just looked a little bit more. First of all, he didn't look very big, and he just looked more like a piranha or something than Venom himself. But it was such a quick shot, you didn't know. Yeah, and he's in a weird because he's on all fours,
right? And the the symbiote whatever is kind of covering his body, and so it was like the process of him becoming Venom, and so that part looked okay, and then the quick part of him coming towards the camera, I remember that. I mean, it's in the movie, but I think I remember the teaser footage too, and it was like something they showed at Comic-Con. I don't remember if it leaked online or something or what, but it was cool enough to get excited about Venom, but it was a little off. And I think at the time when I saw it, I was thinking that it was just early effects. Maybe it just hadn't been finished yet because it was still a little ways out. And so I was excited enough that Venom was going to be in the movie, and this was confirmation of that I was kind of forgiving of the effects. But then when the movie came out, I think it looked the exact same pretty much. It might have been a little touched up, but it doesn't look much different than what's ended up in the final film.
Right.
And Venom just doesn't really look that great.
He doesn't. And, my vision of Eddie Brock's Venom is a towering, character kind of that can take figure. Spider-Man and, like, wrap his entire body around him if he wanted.
Yeah, and I think, maybe he's exaggerated a little in the comics to be a little bigger.
Sure.
And obviously, you'd probably have to tone him down a little bit if you're going to have an actual actor in a suit. But I think they did a real disservice to the character by having Topher Grace cast as Eddie Brock.
Yeah, basically what they made Venom a alter
Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An alter Spider-Man.
Yeah. And and I guess they wanted, it's a very thin storyline, but I think what they were trying to do is kind of have Eddie Brock be this version of Spider-Man or a version of Peter Parker who is perhaps maybe a little more charismatic, but also a little down on his luck-ish, kind of. Not, right. I mean, not really. The only reason he's down on his luck is because Peter Parker got him fired, but I feel like they could have played on that and had him, he thinks he's with Gwen Stacy, and Gwen is like, we just had coffee. So he's like not as much of a hit with the lady as he would hope and everything. And then, of course, when Peter Parker ends up getting him fired and getting the staff job and everything, he wants revenge. But it's just, I don't know, I think as soon as Topher Grace was cast as Eddie Brock, the whole internet, I'm pretty sure, was kind of like, what?
Yeah.
Just because if you look at Eddie Brock in the comics and everything, he's this big guy. He's
a big jock.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why he looks like that in the suit, too, is because Eddie Brock is big.
Right, and they try to beef up Topher Grace a little bit in the suit, and it just doesn't really work.
No, he's got to be almost like a wrestler size.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, they just kind of... And I think that just kind of comes from, number one, Sam Raimi not being a fan of Venom. And not really knowing anything about Venom. So he just... Because he's not a fan, he's willing to change things about him that is obviously going to upset some of the fan base.
Right. Yeah, that's my guess, is that he's like, well, I'd prefer if we are going to have to do this Venom thing, that it just be, like a bad version of Spider-Man fighting himself.
Right.
Because we haven't done that, And then it kind of became the thing later. I consider, the Iron Man 1 was kind of an Iron Man versus Iron Man.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So you think we'll get Venom in the new MCU?
Maybe in the Marvel movies, maybe. But I don't know, because, I was wondering if we were going to get it in the Andrew Garfield version, and then we only got 2 movies of that, and that franchise died. And so now we've got the Marvel Universe version, which Vulture is going to be in that new movie.
Right.
So it's possible they could do Venom, but I don't know if...
I feel like Venom is a villain that... I think they played him at the right time.
In the part 3?
Part 3 is a good spot for him.
Mm-hmm.
But they should have just focused on Venom.
Yeah.
And I like Sandman, like his character, and I mean that in the comic book sense.
Right.
Movie-wise, I wasn't the biggest fan.
No, and I think another problem I had with Venom and the storyline in this film is that it really felt like they were setting up Venom in part 2, and I don't think they realized, Sam Raimi maybe didn't realize that because, I think in the original comics, they have the astronauts go to space, and then they bring back the symbiote, on accident or something. And so Mary Jane was engaged to J. Jonah's son, who was an astronaut in part 2, so it just felt like they were kind of setting up this storyline. And I remember thinking when the movie came out, like, I would have rather have had this movie been 2 different movies, like a part 1 and part 2 type of thing, where you expand on the astronaut storyline, you bring the symbiote back, he's fighting Sandman, and then gets the black suit, and then this movie ends with him either taking the black suit off and Venom, and it landing on Eddie or something, and that last shot of Eddie kind of coming towards the camera, the one that was in the teaser footage, that being like the end of part 1, and then he fights Venom in the next film, or something to that effect. I don't know. I just felt
that
like
sounds good to me. I think that would have worked well. He needs the symbiote to end up being the thing he needs to be able to beat Sandman.
Right.
Sandman's cool. Kind of weird. Like you can't punch him.
Right.
You can shower him down with a hose.
Yeah, that's just... You're right. Just spit on him a bunch or something. I'm not very familiar with Sandman. I know Flint Marko, and I know the character. Like, I can see pictures of Sandman in my brain and everything. But I don't know if I've ever read a comic that had Sandman in it. And so, that being said, I thought Thomas Hayden Church was a good choice to play Flint Marko. I thought he looks great in that shirt and everything as Sandman.
I was very pleased that they picked the shirt.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, sometimes, they change a comic character's look a little too much, and I thought that they did a great job with having him wear that shirt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they pretty much cut him out of the comics, which was pretty cool. Yeah, because I like Thomas Hayden Church.
I do too. I just it felt like they had to cut his story down to make room for Venom. He didn't have a whole lot of dialogue scenes in this film or anything. It was just
his character's pretty
thin.
Yeah, he's flat.
Yeah, which is a shame.
Yeah, I would have liked to focus, like you said, focus on Sandman.
Mm-hmm. Had him just be, you could have. I don't know where the Harry part would have fit in, because you got to wrap up that storyline. But
yeah,
but focus on Sandman. Have him be the main villain, and then have Venom be the villain.
It's weird now that you bring that up, and I'm wondering why did they even have that whole thing in the middle where Harry loses his memory.
I don't know. I'm guessing it's because they didn't want him to have to be fighting Harry the whole time as well. So they have him and Harry have the little fight in the beginning. He loses his memory. That way they can kind of put that aside for a little while. And then, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is there's that one line that Harry says where... he's in the hospital and the nurse says, those are some good friends or whatever. And it's very cheesily, he's like, my best friends. And then he says, I would die for those 2 or something like that, which of course then he later does die for Peter Parker.
Yeah. Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. By the way, I'm going to talk about the whole film. So if you haven't seen Spider-Man 3, too late. But But yeah, so that's the only thing I can think of, is that little bit of foreshadowing or something. But I really think it just seems like they just didn't know what to do with Harry. So but I don't know, maybe they did have that in mind, because Mary Jane goes running off to kind of Harry when she's feeling alone and can't connect with Peter, which causes a little tension. But then he ends up getting his memory back right after that. And I don't know, it's just weird.
I think to me, the whole movie just feels very crunched.
Yes.
Which is, I totally agree about the two-part movie. That's what it needed to be. It probably could have been intended to be originally, and they were like, well, let's just get it all in there in one.
Yeah, I don't know whose decision it was, to make Venom be in this film for sure, but it was a bad decision.
Yeah. Well, I think they were under a lot of pressure, too, from fans, because I know that everyone wanted to see Venom.
Yeah. But I think they could have had a really good movie if they had filmed them back-to-back and done a part 1 and part 2.
Yeah.
However, not necessarily with Topher Grace. I mean, can you imagine having a whole Spider-Man film with Topher Grace's Venom? That probably wouldn't have been so great.
Yeah. Right.
But if they had cast it better and had the story be a little more closer to how it was in the comics and everything, I think it could have been a good part 1 and part 2, but it just didn't work.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about the Marvel cinematic universe, Sony was, Sony has technically, I guess, the film rights to Spider-Man, and they did a deal with Marvel so that Spider-Man could be in those movies. So I don't know if Sony still technically has the rights to Venom, or if that whole Spider-Man cinematic universe, or whatever you want to call it, film rights, is now shared by Sony and Marvel. So can Marvel make Venom? Or is that something that Sony still has? Because for a while, Sony was even going to try to do their own shared universe, because there was going to be Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then there was going to be the Sinister Six movie, and then there was going to be the Venom movie. Those all movies that were in development before the franchise died, and they signed that deal with Marvel.
Okay. So, but I mean, obviously they have the rights to Vulture.
Yeah, you can't have Spider-Man without his villains, so there's that question too. That's why I'm thinking maybe when Sony and Marvel made that deal, it was for the whole the film rights to all of those characters.
Or they had select, villains that they could have signed over. But you're probably right. I don't know why they would have been like, well, yeah, we want Spider-Man, but it's okay. It's okay, we're not going to get the Venom.
Right.
That's okay.
And,
I don't.
And it's Marvel, so they signed. They probably came up when they made the deal with Sony. They probably did like a 3 or 4 or 5 picture deal.
Right.
So,
I think they should have done, instead of Vulture, Green Goblin.
Again?
Yeah, and rollerblades this time.
Rollerblades. Okay. Yes. That's a new twist. Hoverblades. Well, we had a hover snowboard in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying change it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And
I think
anyone that doesn't know, I am totally joking.
Kidding. Yeah. Seeing as how we had Green Goblin in part 1, technically Green Goblin in part 3, if you count Harry, and then Green Goblin in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Right.
Which was also Harry. So, I think it'll be a while before the MCU takes on the Green Goblin.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Willem Dafoe's version of Green Goblin really well. I know that...
I do too.
It was kind of... It took a little while to accept him for as much as I did, because, in the traditional Green Goblin is like a rubber mask.
Right.
That looks like an actual goblin.
Yeah. He's got the green and purple and everything, and this is all green.
Right.
And much more kind of, more of armor rather than like the latex and stuff. But I like it. I still kind of like it.
Yeah, I agree.
So I just wrote down some questions. Basically, these are things that I didn't really understand while I was watching the film.
Okay, there's a good chance I'm not going to have understood either because the movie is just kind of like that.
Right. Well, I think they're just kind of simple. I mean, they're not. It's not like. I think it's just things that weren't thought out or something. Mm-hmm. But like the first question I wrote down was when Harry and Peter are fighting in the very beginning. I think he's left Mary Jane's performance or something like that. I can't remember. Or no, he left Aunt May's because he's got the engagement ring. And then Harry comes and hits him, and they start fighting, and his shirt gets ripped. And I thought, well, why isn't Peter wearing his Spider-Man costume under his suit? Because he seems to always be wearing his Spider-Man costume under his suit. But not this time, because when his shirt gets ripped, you can see his skin underneath. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of times in the film where he's wearing the Spider-Man suit underneath, but then there's other times where he's not. For example, when near the end, when Mary Jane has been taken hostage by Venom and Sandman, and she's in the cab 80 stories up. He has to go home and get his Spider-Man suit out of the little chest that he keeps in his closet, and then he takes his sweet time and looks at the Spider-Man costume.
Right.
And just looks at it while Mary Jane is in trouble.
He's like, well, this is it. Am I going?
I'm putting on my costume. I'm going to save the lady. Oh, I took too long. She's dead.
Yeah, that's the worst part of the movie for me is that whole last like half hour sequence.
Yes, it is easily the worst sequence.
And I've always said that it feels like Sam Raimi left the movie at that point, and they're like, well, we've got to get someone to direct the last half hour of the movie. But like still a lot of the movie is got its problems. Yeah. Not near to the degree and as noticeable as the last, half hour.
Third. The last act or whatever you want.
Yeah. But,
yeah, I mean, since we're talking about it, I mean, I think my biggest beef with it is it's super cheesy.
Yeah.
And it's not helped at all by the news anchor and the news reporter.
That's one of the biggest problems is because the way that the news report is presented it's almost like a narrator.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we had to tell you what's going on because we don't know how to show it to you or something. And then the woman, she's just she's narrating it too basically, and it's completely unnecessary.
Right.
When he's getting kind of beaten, he's being held down by Venom and being beaten by Sandman. Like, it's pretty brutal. We see that it's brutal. We see that he's struggling.
Right.
And she's like, I don't know how much more he can take of this. The brutality of it. Right. And I hate them. I want her to be like, shut up.
Right.
Like, let me just watch the scene.
Well, not to mention, like you said, they're like 80 stories up.
Well, that's very true.
She shouldn't be able to see them.
Right.
They should have no idea what's going on out there. And how could she read the webbing?
Yeah, I know. The cameraman had to zoom in on it, but she could read it just fine.
Yeah.
And that part is cheesy too, but there's a part of me that almost likes it just because it's something I feel like you would see in the comic.
Right. Well, did you notice is the Spider-Man font?
Yes, I did notice that, yes. That was very clever of Eddie Brock.
Yeah.
I also wondered, and I don't... Maybe Venom does this in the comics. You might know. Does Venom can he do webbing like Spider-Man can?
It's like in the movie here. It's the symbiote.
So he's just kind of throwing his symbiote around.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of figured, but I just thought it was interesting. So he wasted a lot of symbiote in spelling out Spider-Man.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, he's got the webbing all over the place.
Yeah, that's very true.
He should be naked.
Yeah. Well, I guess, the symbiote is just ever expanding, I guess, because it started off as just this little piece of symbiote.
I don't know that much about it, so I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, I don't either. I hate to say it, but I think most of my Venom knowledge comes from the animated series Spider-Man and that whole, those few episodes that had Venom and, or the black suit and Venom and all that stuff.
I had one or two comics with him in it.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that many comics, so.
Right. I think we can both agree, though, that the worst part of that whole sequence are those two stupid kids.
Yes. And you know what?
That says...
This came out after, I think it was either Goblet of Fire or Prisoner of not Prisoner of Azkaban, Order of the Phoenix. It's one of those two, and the Weasley twins.
Yeah.
Do that wicked at the same time.
Yeah,
and it was funny. And I really think it was this one. It was shortly after, and then they did that scene, and I was like, they took that from Harry Potter. And I was like, and it was stupid.
Yeah. It's just, I wonder, every time I see that scene, I wonder, okay, which producer's kids, which producer had those, some nephew or something of somebody, and they got put in the movie.
Had to have been, man.
They're not good, and it's not a good, I don't know, it's just terrible. One of them is like, awesome, the other one, wicked cool.
Right. It's awkward, it doesn't make sense, it's not
terrible.
Realistic.
Terrible.
Yeah. I've got Thomas Hayden Church's IMDb page pulled up here, and he was born in Yolo, California.
YOLO?
YOLO.
Wow. Interesting.
That's what he apparently said when he took on the role of Sandman.
Yeah, that's right. He just actually tells everybody, well, you know where I'm from, right? I go, where? And he goes, YOLO. And they go, what? And he goes, I'm doing it. I'm doing the part.
What were some parts in the movie that you liked?
Excellent question. I do like the first fight scene between Spider-Man and Sandman on the armored truck.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sequence
it's not bad.
Is decent. Yeah, decent. The crane scene is okay. I think when he's catching Gwen Stacy, that part is kind of cool, where he's kind of jumping from falling piece of building to falling piece of building.
He squeezes his body to go through the... Yeah, I agree. Yeah. That was a cool part.
That's fun sequence to watch.
And that's where... that's kind of what I'm talking about, where, those parts felt like Sam Raimi.
Right. Yeah.
But then he also starts getting a little bit of the goofiness throughout, like where in Spider-Man 2 you had the bicycle scene. Well, it wasn't a bicycle, was it? I know it was a bicycle in Butch Cassidy and the song, the raindrops.
Oh, you're just talking about the raindrops?
Yeah. In Butch Cassidy, they're riding a bicycle. It might have just been him walking through the park.
It was just him walking.
Okay. Well, that's, that was funny. But then I think, and everyone liked that scene. And Sam Raimi, I'm sure, was sitting in the theater during the premiere, and everyone was cracking up, and he wanted to kind of get some more of that feeling in this. Mm-hmm. Because that's, every time I see him, starting to do that dancing and walking down the sidewalk with his new, personality, it just reminds me of that scene in Spider-Man 2, but I'm like, this is not working.
I agree. That's exactly what I thought when I saw it the first time. I thought, oh, okay, he's just trying to rehash from the really good scene in Spider-Man 2, and it's not as good in this one. And I still feel that way, but I will say when I saw it in the theater, when he comes out of the store in the suit, and then he does the kind of dance, claps his hands, does the little dance, everybody cracked up in the theater during that part.
Yeah, I actually didn't mind the scene.
Yeah,
when I saw it in the theater, it wasn't until later, and I didn't go back and watch it in the theater again, which
I did.
Well, I knew that I didn't like it,
mm-hmm.
And I didn't see it again until after it was released, and then I remember seeing that the whole scene of him walking through the city, and I was like, no, I'm not liking that.
No, I agree. I actually didn't hate this movie when I first saw it. I had some problems with it, and I didn't like it nearly as much as Spider-Man 2. But I think, I'm always kind of blinded by my love for just superheroes, and so I always kind of end up liking the movie a lot at first, and then usually after a little time has gone by, I just realize that it's not that great. And that's how I feel about it now. I don't think it's that good, and I don't think that sequence is that good, but I did read a long time ago something online about how it's actually kind of appropriate for him to act that way because, and I'm not remembering this correctly probably, but the symbiote amplifies the traits of its host, right?
Right.
And then Dr. Connor says especially aggression. Well, Peter Parker, and I do appreciate how this movie really does kind of make him a dork or a dweeb. He's kind of a nerdy dude. And I would go so far to say he's kind of uncool a little bit, Like when you see him sitting in the theater watching Mary Jane and he's like saying the words with her
right.
and he has like that big grin on his face. Like he's just kind of this silly, goofy kind of dweeb.
Right.
And so the symbiote amplifies those characteristics. And so I feel like he is what a kind of dorky dweeb guy would think is this cool kind of bad character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's how I was taking it. Like, every time that sequence starts and he starts walking and then it shows like a couple of the girls that are passing him and like the first one's like looking at him like, what's this guy up to?
Yeah, exactly.
But then like the next ones, like as they're walking by, almost look like they're turning and looking at him like ooh, look at him. And then there's a couple other things afterwards, I can't remember what, but they kind of give that vibe. And then when he's taking Gwen to the restaurant and he's like, find us some shade. Slips her the money. She's like, right this way, sir. And you can see like in her face, it's kind of like I liked that. Like their faces are really close when so
yeah. No, I hear you. And I'm glad you brought that scene up because I think that montage with him walking down the street and you see him at the Daily Bugle, and he's kind of hitting on Betty Brant. And,
right,
he's eating the cookies.
Yeah, exactly.
He's eating the cookies with his landlord's daughter and stuff, and he's kind of being a whatever. I think if it was just that montage, obviously there's no Mary Jane in that, and there has to be kind of that Mary Jane scene. But if it had just been that montage, I think it would have been a lot easier to swallow. But because of that scene where he goes to the restaurant, even though I just watched it, I forgot about the find us some shade.
Right. And there's another part where he's doing the dancing.
And that's what I'm saying. Like that scene, I think, takes it just a step too far, maybe a few steps too far. Because once he starts, I actually wrote down, that was another question I wrote down. He starts playing the piano, and he's playing it really well.
Oh, he's like a pro,
and my question was,
man.
Did he always know how to play the piano? Or is like the symbiote moving his fingers or something? And then he does the whole dance sequence and everything, and I'm just kind of like, come on. This is just a little too ridiculous. And I forget what he says, but they do that close-up of his mouth.
I think he says, now check this, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
It's very weird, and he whispers it.
Yeah, it's kind of just the whole thing is kind of awkward. You can feel Sam Raimi in there, too. A lot of the shots and everything definitely feel like Sam Raimi. But
and he's probably, and like you said, you can feel him, and I feel him watching this like while he's directing it and being like, yes, this is great. That's good. They're going to love this.
Yep. It just, it didn't, that scene is just almost hard to watch, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's one of the major reasons for me not liking this movie. I mean, it's little things like that add up.
Right. Yeah, if it was just if that scene was the only thing that I had a problem with, I could overlook it and enjoy the film. But there's just, like you said, there's so many of those little things.
Right.
That they really add up and they really bring the movie down.
There's some bad writing, in my opinion. You've got the scene at the beginning with Sandman when he goes to visit his daughter and his wife, and he's like sneaks into the house, and his wife is just like the way that they interact.
I live in the presence of great truth.
Yeah,
like it's just very weird dialogue. Yeah,
exactly.
No, I hear you, and I don't know Alvin Sargent wrote Spider-Man 2, and that is still considered one of the greatest comic book movies ever made.
Right.
And he's a credited writer on this film, but I wonder if, Sam Raimi and Ivan Raimi have the story credit, so did they do the first draft of the screenplay and then Alvin Sargent came in and tried to fix it as much as he could? Or did Alvin Sargent write a screenplay, Sam Raimi and Ivan Raimi didn't like it, and they kind of changed it? I don't know who to blame. I don't know who is to blame, other than Sam Raimi. I mean, you can blame Sam Raimi, I think, for a good portion of this film just because he is a credited writer and the director.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know what went wrong with all that stuff, especially after Spider-Man 2 being so good.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's very weird to watch Spider-Man 2 and then follow up with this one.
Yeah. It's kind of sad, really.
Right.
And like you said, we all had really high hopes for Spider-Man 3 because Spider-Man 2 was so good.
Yeah, and he's he's in the symbiote. Like, I was super stoked about that.
We're getting Black Suit Spider-Man, we're getting Venom. Sam Raimi didn't do us wrong with Spider-Man 2. This is going to be amazing. And then it was not.
Exactly.
What are some of the things you like about the film?
Well, I'm pretty much just echoing what you said. Like, there's those moments that do feel like Raimi's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble thinking of stuff I like, actually. Because all that's popping in my head is things that I don't like. I can list stuff like that. So maybe if I'll start doing that, and maybe I'll think of some things during that I like. I'll start with the fact that they decided to make Flint Marko the guy that killed Uncle Ben.
Oh, yeah.
That just didn't work for me. I'm like, no. You can just see that was added in and that you guys had to, alter things to make it fit.
Yeah.
So that you could have a reason why Peter Parker was so, I don't know. He would have been going after him as Sandman, but I think they wanted him to have especially with the symbiote being on him, and he had this controversial thing going back and forth with his personality and his morals.
Yeah, and they wanted him to be angry, probably. Yeah,
they needed to have a reason, a very good, legit reason for why he would be mad at him. Be
angry towards him.
Yeah.
Right. They needed to make it personal, basically. Right. They couldn't just have Spider-Man going after Flint Marko just because he's a criminal. They needed him to be going after him because there was a personal reason for wanting to take this guy down.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. It felt wrong, honestly. It just doesn't feel right. And then when you find out at the end that it was an accident, even though he had a gun pointed at him, he didn't mean to shoot Uncle Ben, it just doesn't.
Well, that doesn't match with what he said to his wife. If he was even talking about Uncle Ben, which
unless he was killing somebody else,
huh?
Well, she says to him you may have even killed a man, and he says it wasn't like that, right? Isn't that what he says?
From what I remember, he said something like, "I had good reason to do it."
Oh,
it was I think it was pretty laid out. If I'm not, pull it up, where he's like, I had a good reason for doing what doing it. Basically, he was admitting to murder and saying that he wasn't in the wrong doing it. I hated how the confession part at the end.
Sandman's confession?
Yeah, and Harry dies. Venom's dead. And then of course, we still got Sandman. Cuts to Sandman. And he's like, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do all this." And Spider-Man's like, "I forgive you." And then he goes floating into the wind and just gets away. And Spider-Man is just like, "Yeah, have a nice life. Thanks for apologizing."
It's cool that you caused all this destruction and everything and stole the money earlier and everything. It's fine.
Right.
Go off into the sunset.
It was just very weird.
It was very weird.
It just didn't match up. It's also another thing I don't like, the cramming together where, Venom meets Sandman and he's like, "Hey, I hate Peter Parker too. Let's team up," and then it goes to the end scene where it was very quick. No setup for that sequence at all.
Well, also in that scene, Venom is swinging around, and Sandman stops him, and he says something like, "This is where it ends, Spider-Man." And then he realizes that it's not Spider-Man, and he just starts walking away oh.
You know what his line was?
Huh?
"I don't like Spider-Man." He slams him to the ground saying, "I don't like Spider-Man."
And that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But then it's Venom, and he's like, oh. And so he starts walking away.
Yeah.
And then that's when Venom is like, wait. I don't like Spider-Man either. Let's fight him together. And he goes,
I might look like, I'm a big fan. I dress like him. I swing through the city. But, man, I hate that guy.
Right. And Sandman's just like, deal.
Right. Where do you want to meet? 80 stories up. Bring a cab.
I'm going to bring lots of sand so that you can be huge.
Where did he get all that sand from?
I'm assuming that's why they picked the construction area.
Yeah,
There's just a lot of sand around, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of sand. And you pointed this out to me last time. Why, when you have a giant creature in a movie, especially one that seems coherent to begin with, does he become a groaning idiot?
Yeah.
When he's large.
That's something I've never understood about Sandman in this film, or at least this scene, is that when he becomes huge, he starts... I didn't notice that he was moving as slow as I remembered, because that was my question in Civil War. When Ant-Man becomes Giant Man, he moves really slowly. Right. And I thought I remembered Sandman moving really slowly in this, and he doesn't... He moves a little faster than I remembered, but he can't speak anymore. And that's something I do not understand.
Yeah, I think that's just, bad decision-making again. They're like, well, there's a giant monster on the screen. He's not going to be talking, so let's just make him...
Right, he's a giant monster, so he's just going to be going...
Right. It's more intimidating for the audience.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I'm saying that's what they said. I'm not agreeing with that.
Right, no, I know the thought process. But I just... And maybe that's what somebody in that meeting said was what I just said. Yeah, I guess. And he just went with
it. One of them actually makes a joke. They're like, hey, well, let's just make him groan and be an idiot. And they're like, yeah.
Sam Raimi's like, perfect.
Why did I say that to the studio?
I was kidding. It was actually probably a studio head or something.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
he's a giant.
That's my guess. The biggest problem with this movie is Spider-Man was huge. Spider-Man 2 was even bigger, and they're like, we are going to get our say in what this third one is because we know, I like this idea and I want it to be in the movie, and I'm, way higher up than you, and I can say if we're going to do it or not. So we're going to do it.
Yeah, and I don't understand why that happens sometimes. I mean, obviously, I don't know how often it really
right.
happens.
It's an assumption.
I'm not in those situations, but yeah, it does feel like
people that don't know what decisions to make, but have the power to make those decisions, start making them.
And why do it when Sam Raimi has proven to make two really good movies? Why all of a sudden interfere?
Right.
But like I said, I don't know. Since we weren't there, this is just an assumption, and we're giving Sam Raimi kind of the benefit of the doubt because he did make two good movies. It's very possible it's the other way around. I mean, obviously, Venom was pushed on him, right. But what if Spider-Man 1 and 2 had more studio interference than we realize, and then they let Sam Raimi have full reign in Spider-Man 3, and he ruined it?
Could be.
You don't know. But I like to think it's the other way around, and Sam Raimi is still a decent filmmaker, but
yeah,
I don't know. One of the questions I wrote down, speaking of Sandman, is why when he's stealing the armored truck, those cops shoot at him, and he looks like he's in pain, and I've never really understood why bullets can hurt Sandman. You'd think they would just
that's good.
Go through him.
That's a good question.
Especially since Spider-Man can just punch right through him. And I understand a fist is a little different than a bullet, but still. Thought that was weird.
I liked the little... here's something I liked. Was after that battle when he takes off his mask and he's got like the sand in his hair.
Yeah,
I like that too. His shoe off and there's like a whole
lot of sand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And I like what he says there too. He's like, where do these guys come from?
Right.
Which I think is pretty good.
The whole sequence where he turns into Sandman is a little weird. Like, what were they doing with the sand to
I don't
begin
know.
with? Like, he stumbles in this very sophisticated, like, laboratory where there's these scientists, like, just getting ready to do this experiment on sand. He falls in, and they're like, all right, let's do the... I mean, it wasn't as cool as, and way too convenient compared to, like Doc Ock when he was doing the solar demonstration, and Green Goblin going and having to test the
experiment
formula on himself because the project was done. I mean, those were legitimate reasons for what happened.
Right. This was just an accident, wrong place, wrong time type of thing.
Right.
And those scientists are terrible because they're like, there's been a change in the matter or whatever.
Just
and he's like, oh, it's probably just a bird. It'll fly away. And you're like, maybe you should check.
Right.
Maybe you should check this out. It could also, throw off your data if you don't go check. So,
and that's another example of little bad writing that frequently shows up in this. And I was talking. It's the little things. It's just the little things that add up.
Yeah.
And really weigh this movie down.
Another question I had was, so Harry gets his memory back, and he convinces Mary Jane to break up with Peter, and then he tells Peter that he's the other guy. He's really trying to mess with Peter. And Peter eventually puts on the black suit and decides to take out his aggression on Harry, and they get in that fight scene, and it ends with Harry essentially kind of blowing up.
Right.
And he clearly was injured, especially based on how his face looks later. And that's my big question. How much time has passed between that and the final battle in the movie? Because Harry's face is completely healed and scarred. Like, that's
a good point. I didn't even think about that. And that's where I feel like this movie was so crammed together, because I really think that there was a lot of material in between these, point A to point B that got cut out, because there's so many moments where you're like, that was really quick.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about that, but yeah, you're right. It's healed and
scarred over and everything. Like, you don't see him in the hospital or anything. He's just completely fine. Aside from, the scarring and stuff, but he's completely healed up and everything. And that his face looks like it had some damage done to it. So you'd think he'd be healing for a while.
Right. Like, I know what I was thinking of. Yeah, there's that moment where he's fighting Venom, and Venom like jumps down on him after he tethers him to some of his webbing, and he's like looking him in the eyes, and he's like, "Do you remember what you did to me?"
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, that was like 2 or 3 days ago. Of course he does.
That's exactly what I said when I was watching it just now. Denise and I were watching it, and he said that, he goes, "Do you remember?" And I said, well, yeah, it was like 2 days ago.
Right.
So that's exactly what I thought. So maybe more time has passed since then. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. Bruce Campbell was great. His little cameo.
Yeah, that scene's a little goofy too, but yeah, I like Bruce Campbell and his cameo in that.
Right.
I actually really like Kirsten Dunst in this film. I think she does a really good job.
She's one of the stronger parts. I'll agree with you.
Yeah. And I've always liked Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker / Spider-Man. I think he's great in this film.
Yeah.
Gwen Stacy, I feel like doesn't really need to be in the film. She's just there to kind of, be kind of a love interest to Eddie Brock, sort of, and then ends up being kind of a love interest to Peter Parker to kind of make Mary Jane jealous or something.
Right. It's almost like one of those, what other characters, do we have to get in here? Because Gwen Stacy's a big fan favorite. And,
right, of course,
we need to have Gwen in the movie now.
Right. But for, what she had, I thought Bryce Dallas Howard was pretty good in it.
Yeah, I didn't mind her too much.
She looked like Gwen Stacy.
Mm-hmm. I liked how Connors, Dr. Connors, they had a little bit of interaction with him, and
right.
And over these, we were talking about how would he have been Lizard in the fourth film, Well, if he had, it would have worked out really nicely because you've seen him in all three movies. Or wait, it was just the first. It was just the two. Yeah,
there's 2 and 3. Yeah.
But you really started, seeing, hey, they're working together,
right?
And that would have been
almost developing kind of a friendship,
right? And I was going to say that would have been even more interesting than Harry, in my opinion. Harry and Peter fighting,
yeah,
because it's like his mentor,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
And not only that, but it's someone who's been helping him kind of solve these problems throughout. Of course, he really didn't do anything with Doc Ock, but he was, trying to.
Well, he didn't really do anything with this either, other than just tell him it amplifies aggression. And
right.
He's like,
well, I mean, that's important information.
Well, I guess so. He gave him information, which Peter just ignores because at that point he's already wearing it.
Yeah.
That's that whole scene where he's on the phone with eating cookies that the landlord's daughter made.
Right.
So he is wearing the black suit often, and he can take his mask off no problem. He wears the black suit under his clothes, but he doesn't have the mask on. But suddenly, after he accidentally hits Mary Jane, and she's like, "Who are you?" He decides, okay, I got to get rid of this black suit. He realizes it's the black suit that's kind of changing him, and he's got to get rid of it.
Right.
He's not wearing the mask.
He's
at
like,
that point,
whoa. Did I just say find me some shade?
Yeah, he's like, I don't like who I am anymore. So he decides he's got to go get rid of the suit. But like I said, he's not wearing the mask at that moment. So he clearly leaves the restaurant, puts the mask on, gets in his, takes his outer clothes off, and swings to the church, and then starts trying to take it off. And suddenly, and maybe it's the symbiote realizing what he's doing, and maybe it's resisting and fighting back, but suddenly he cannot get his mask off or the suit off.
Yeah, and that's the way I took it. I'll give him that. I think the alien is fighting him.
It's just resisting?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in that case, I understand. But watching it this time, I was like, why is it all of a sudden he can't get that suit off?
Yeah.
And I understand it's also to set up the loud noises thing.
Right. Well, that's actually, if I'm not mistaken, that's how he gets it off in the comics, is the church bell.
I'm pretty sure.
Because I think in fact in the Venom comic that I had, it showed just a panel of Parker underneath the church bell, and it like ringing and it coming off of him.
Right, and that's how it is in the animated series.
Mm-hmm.
In the episode when he's getting it off, it's the church bell. So that I completely understand why they did that. They stuck true to the comics there. I just thought it was weird that all of a sudden he was having trouble with it. But I guess the symbiote understood what he was doing and was fighting back. I can go with that.
Mm-hmm. I didn't like Brock in the church. It just didn't make sense. It didn't fit.
I want you to kill Peter Parker.
I kind of liked, though, how when he went through the doors, Peter Parker was up there, and in his mind, he's like, my prayers have been answered?
Yeah. He has to be in the church, though, because it has to fall on him. So.
Well, yeah, unless, there's other ways to do that.
Yeah, I agree. What's your beef with that scene mostly? Is it just that he's praying to, is he asking God to kill Peter Parker? Is that the main issue, or is it just him being? It just seems
kind of just the whole him sitting there, and it's just his delivery of the way he's talking to the crucifix, and it just didn't feel.
Doesn't ring true.
Yeah. I also didn't like how. With the black suit, I like the regular Spider-Man suit, but with the silver webbing and stuff, I felt like they should have made the symbiote completely black like it was in the comic.
Yeah, I agree. Seeing the black suit, when that first picture came out, which almost looked like a black and white picture of him in the regular suit, and then you realized it was him in the black suit, there was that disappointment that it wasn't the black suit that we have, known to in the comics and come to love. But it was still cool seeing him in the black suit.
Right.
So...
Right, because that was confirmation that if Venom wasn't in the movie, they were going that direction, and you were going to get a symbiote Spider-Man.
Right. So that was cool. And I can understand why they did it, because the symbiote kind of comes over his regular suit, so it just kind of...
Yeah, but it's got to go into those crevices and stuff. And
yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I agree with you. I think it would have been cooler to see him in the slick black suit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm assuming though that the designers probably wanted to maintain some of that familiarity of Spider-Man, so that when you did see him, you knew that it was him in the black suit and everything. Yeah, even though you could still do that, but yeah, I get you. Aunt May.
Mm-hmm.
Great job,
Rosemary Harris
again.
Yeah, of course.
She clearly, I think we were asking this question beforehand, and I've always been under the impression that, and especially this movie, that she knows that he's Spider-Man.
Yep, they never come out and say it, but when he's telling her that Spider-Man killed Sandman, she's like, Spider-Man doesn't kill people.
Right.
Like, you can tell in that scene, she knows...
Well, I mean, she's like, well, what happened?
Right.
I mean, yeah, just the stuff, and, she was told to act that way, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But just the stuff she says, her facial expressions and body language, yeah, she's, I'd say she knows.
Yeah. I would agree with that. 100%. Yeah. Let's talk real quick about Bernard. Which I think is weird. I don't know why his name's not Bernard.
Right.
But Harry's Alfred, essentially. Quick little trivia about that guy. That guy is Bill Paxton's dad.
Really?
Yep. I think... Let me look real quick. I think he may have passed away recently. Let me look.
Oh, here's the boys at the final battle. Oh, Lorne Raimi and Henry Raimi.
Well, there you go.
That explains everything.
Sure does.
So this movie actually came out before Order of the Phoenix, and I'm pretty sure that scene where the Weasley brothers say "wicked" was in Order of the Phoenix.
Mm.
So, actually, but they came out the same year.
I found him. He's credited as Houseman rather than Bernard.
That's weird.
But his name is John Paxton. He died. I thought he had died. He died about 5 years ago, 2011. But yeah, that is Bill Paxton's father. And if you find the bloopers to Spider-Man 3, he apparently struggled pretty hard with getting his lines out. And I mean, he was pretty old, but yeah, I thought that's another thing that I don't like about this film is, Harry basically tells Peter that he's not going to help him when Mary Jane's in trouble. He's like, I still hate you. And then his butler comes up to him and he's like, hey, I just want to let you know that your dad definitely killed himself. And I know that because I cleaned his wound.
Right, which isn't proof, by the way.
No, not at all. I was thinking that exactly. He's like, he was killed with the blade from his own glider. And I was like, yeah, but Spider-Man could have still stabbed him with that blade. Like, how is that irrefutable proof that he died by his own hand? But either way, I just think I feel like that's another cop-out, Yeah. I feel like they were writing it, and they could not figure out how to get Harry to become friends with Peter again, and that's just how they did it. They had the butler say, and why didn't he say that like way earlier? When he's clearly, I mean, if Bernard knows everything that's going on, he clearly knows that Harry's been fighting Spider-Man previously. Like, he could have saved him from getting his face all blown up.
Right.
if I was Harry, I'd been like, okay, well, you're fired, and then and now I'm going to go help my friend.
I was on his IMDb page. His first acting credit is from 1990.
John Paxton?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's from a movie called Brain Dead, which Bill Paxton was in.
Well, maybe his dad retired, and Bill Paxton was like, "Well, you want to be in some of the movies I'm in?"
That's what it looks like. Well, I can't really think of much else to talk about this movie. The villains were pretty terrible. Story was not that great. The execution was even worse. Even, I was listening to the theme, Sandman's theme, and of course Danny Elfman was not involved with this movie because he and Sam Raimi apparently got in a little bit of a argument.
They had a falling out. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to the Sandman's theme, and I was like, this kind of cliche and boring.
Yeah.
And all I could think of was what would Danny Elfman have done? And I can imagine maybe something that sounds almost like sand, like flowing sand or something would have been really cool.
Yeah, I remember being upset that Danny Elfman was not doing Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the name Christopher Young in the credits and just being sad that it wasn't Danny Elfman. And then I remember hearing, the music is not that noticeable. I can't even tell you what the Sandman music was. I didn't even really hear it.
It sounded like it was kind of inspired by Doc Ock's theme. Sweet.
Okay.
A little bit. Yeah.
I think the music that I noticed the most is it's in the opening credits, and it's also as soon as you see him for the first time in the black suit, there's this there's the horns, and it's like da 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 da, ba da 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 da, something like that, and it just, like you said, it kind of feels a little weirdly cliche, I guess.
Right.
It just does not. It's just nowhere near as good as what Danny Elfman could have done, I think, and it's a real shame that they had a falling out. I think I'm looking up right now to see if they reconciled, because I want to say he did do the music for Oz.
Yeah, he did.
The Great and Powerful. So yeah, so that's nice that they reconciled. I'm glad that they were able to kind of put aside whatever problems they had. But I really wish they could have done that before Spider-Man 3 came out, because I really would be interested to hear what he would have done with this film. And obviously, they used the Danny Elfman Spider-Man theme because that's still in the film and everything. But yeah, I feel like I don't know much about Christopher Young, and I don't know what other movies he's done. But
he did Drag Me to Hell, which makes sense because that came out after Spider-Man 3, and he didn't have Danny Elfman. He did Ghost Rider right before this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, his music, I guess. Not necessarily. Well, I don't know if you would you say the music is bad in this film? I would say it's not necessarily bad. It's not very
bad.
memorable.
It's definitely not bad, because bad would be where you noticed it because it was so bad. But it just kind of blends in, and there's nothing really special about it. I'm glad that they never really changed Spider-Man's suit.
Yeah, I agree.
Through all the movies, it was really the same suit, and I wish they would do that
more often.
Yeah,
I agree, and I think they'll do that with Spider-Man. Or the new Spider-Man. I don't know. I mean, his suit from what I've seen from Spider-Man: Homecoming is going to be the exact same as it was from Civil War,
which I like.
Yeah,
but traditionally, the MCU has done lots of altering with their outfits.
Yes. Especially with Captain America and Iron Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Did they really do anything with Thor?
Well, yeah, kind of. The first Thor, he had, the kind of metallic-looking sleeves and everything. And then in Avengers, when he first shows up in Avengers, he eventually does get those metallic sleeves back. But for the first, 2 2/3 of Avengers, he's got the sleeveless look and everything.
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth just wanted to show off his biceps.
His biceps, yeah. So his suit has changed a little, but not. It's stayed relatively the same throughout the movies, as far as I can tell. But Captain America's has changed a whole bunch, and obviously Iron Man's has changed because he's gone through the different marks and everything.
Well, his makes the most sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I agree. I'm hoping they can kind of keep it the same, because that's, they did that with The Amazing Spider-Man came out, and he had a kind of different looking suit, and I actually grew to kind of like it. And then The Amazing Spider-Man 2 comes out, and it's completely different, a little bit more reminiscent of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and there's really no explanation for it in the film. He just has that suit now. That's just who he is.
Yeah.
So I thought that was always kind of weird that, I think they used to do that more often. Batman came out, and then Batman Returns, he had a new suit, and there was no explanation for it. And then, of course, you get a new director for Batman Forever, and he's got a slightly different suit. And then you have a new actor for Batman and Robin, and so then he's got a new suit. So those are kind of understandable, I guess. But no explanation for any of that. And so it was just kind of the norm, I guess, in that time, even though those were really the only comic book movies that were really coming out. And so then you get Batman Begins in The Dark Knight, and at least there's an explanation for it in The Dark Knight. And then it's the same suit in Dark Knight Rises, so that stayed the same. But yeah, that's... I think it's just... I don't know if it's costume designers who just don't want to keep making the same thing over and over again, and they want to bring new stuff to it.
I have a feeling that they're just kind of like lots of artists. They're like, oh, I could have done this after, it's already finalized. And they kind of want to
tweak it for the next go-around. Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate that as well, because I honestly really like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man suit, and I think it looks really good. I do too. And so I like that they kept it the same. Well, I guess it's about time to give the film a rating. I'll go first, since you're since you're making that face. I don't know. I'm tempted to be really harsh on it and give it a really low grade. But I think I give it points, and I know I shouldn't, but I feel like I give it points just because it's Spider-Man. And I didn't, we sat through the movie today, and I never wanted to really turn it off. I never got so bored with it that I just was, hurting, essentially. So I was able to watch the whole thing in one sitting, and I won't go so far to say I was entertained, but I will also say I wasn't bored. So I definitely think there are worse superhero films. I think part of the reason why Spider-Man 3 gets such a bad rap is because we had such high hopes for it.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that totally.
Is it the worst superhero movie out there? Absolutely not. Is it good? No. So I think for me, I would give it, I don't know, I'm somewhere between a C- and a D+ is kind of what I'm leaning to. I think I'm going to give it a C-.
Okay. Well, on the Netflix scale of 5 stars, 1 being you hated it, 5 meaning you loved it, I'm going to give it...
You're going with 5.
2.
A 2, yeah. That's what I kind of figured you would go with.
Which basically is saying I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I can't really say I hate it either.
Right. That's kind of where I'm at.
But I definitely feel a little bit of a leaning that direction.
Yeah.
Just because of how disappointing it was. But you did have a little bit, you could still feel occasionally the Raimi quality in there. And, I always liked Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker.
Yep. And I love J.K. We didn't talk about him, but J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is still just probably one of the best aspects of the trilogy, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Yep. In fact, that he's got one part in that scene we were talking about at the end, which I really like with the camera.
It also feels a little weird that he's just happens to be there, but I guess he's a newspaperman. He's a newspaperman, so maybe he kind of went he heard about it and he kind of decided to go there to try to get like a little bit of a scoop for his paper.
That's not true.
That's not true.
You're right. I didn't even think about it. Why is he there?
Just because they wanted that scene. I mean, that's the real reason he's there. They wanted that scene with the camera and a little bit of a laugh right there,
right.
But yeah.
They're like, we need something after the wicked cool.
Right. Sam Raimi.
In fact,
I don't know if those are his kids
that girl,
or what.
I think is listed here. Let me see. Girl at Final Battle. Samantha
Raimi.
Wrestler. She was in one other movie a year prior.
And then she gave up on acting.
And Spider-Man 3, they said, nope, you're out of here.
Spider-Man 3 ruined her career.
Spider-Man 3 ruined her career.
That's funny. Well, we'd love to know what you think about Spider-Man 3. Did you hate it like pretty much the rest of the world, or did you actually kind of like it? We'd love to know. You can let us know on Facebook, facebook.com/SM and SM Podcast. You can go to our website, www.cinemaheroes.com. You can leave us a comment there. Or you can go to Twitter. Tweet at us, @CinemaHeroes. I think that about wraps it up for this episode. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading.